Good Friday morning, Backyard Naturalists. It's great for me to be back hosting another episode of the Backyard Naturalist after a few weeks away. Um, my name is Tim, and I work at the Urban Ecology Center here in Milwaukee, and it's May. Happy May. Happy May the 3rd. May the 3rd be ever in your favor. May the 3rd be with you. Uh, may the apple never fall far from the tree, or in this case, the plant. We're talking about a perennial herbaceous plant that we call the May apple today. It's one of the more common and recognizable and lovely plants that carpet the woodlands in these parts in spring as a wildflower. And so we are going to learn more about the stories this plant has to tell in episode 35 of season 5 of The Backyard Naturalist, May Apples Never Fall. Like PBS, we would like to thank you, like this gentleman, for joining us, whether you're here live or watching the recording. We're glad you're here on this learning journey with us. If you are a subscriber to the Backyard Naturalist, thank you so much for your support. We're super grateful. If you want to know more about the benefits of a subscription, please contact anyone on the research team. In addition to no hassle registration for the weekly virtual program, we explore the backyards of Milwaukee in person and together. And for the month of May, our field trip is going to be very close to home. We're going to revisit and re-explore parts of the Rotary Centennial Arboretum. There's a lot to explore, a lot of different places we haven't really looked at. And that includes Riverside Park. So the backyard of the Urban Ecology Center. This will happen on May 18th at 1 p.m. You can sign up for that on our website. These trips are open to everyone and free for subscribers. And May 18th is notable because it's the day after the Brew City Birding Festival ends, which is really just around the corner. So Milwaukee is one of the best places, in my opinion, to look for birds and to celebrate birds. We are an official bird city with high flyer status. And so the Brew City Birding Festival is a fantastic way to celebrate birds in Milwaukee. There's a ton of great events happening, lectures and workshops and field trips. And in anticipation of these events, which start next week, I'll take you just quickly through a daily tour of what the festival offers. So we kick off a week from today right here on Backyard Naturalist on May 10th with an episode called Owls Moving Castle. Owls are a group of birds that we've yet to talk about in the almost 5 years that we've been on the air. And then on Saturday, May 11th, we're hosting the 12th annual Green Birding Challenge, which this year, in addition to the friendly, mostly friendly, fossil fuel-free competition, we are revisiting the fledgling Fun Family event. So lots of great bird activities for the wee ones that take place in a much more sane part of the day, including a migration obstacle course. So whether you're looking just for something for the family, something for yourself, whether you're a beginner birder or really into it, there's something for everybody. And as we celebrate World Migratory Bird Day together. And then the next day is Mother's Day. And you can treat your family or friends to explore your backyards together for the annual Backyard Birding Blitz. It's a really low-key event. Go out when you want, where you want, and we're just gonna collectively, as a group, see how many different birds we can find in our local green spaces. It's always fun because we tend to get some random participants from around the world. So we'll add things like I don't know, the club-tail hummingbird to our list that includes cardinals, and it's just kind of, again, on your own, enter onto eBird, easy to do. Then on Monday, May 13th, we'll take a trip over to Harrington Beach State Park. We were there recently at our own, but this year we're going to go with the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory. So not only are you going to go to a great place to look for birds on a great day for warblers, shorebirds, everything, we're also going to have a chance to hear about the great work that the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory is doing while exploring one of the best local birding hotspots. And then we're going to bring it inside that evening for our first ever Wingspan game night. Wingspan is one of my all-time favorite board games. If you haven't played it, I encourage you to play it. Um, it's got beautiful imagery. It's based on good science. It's a super fun and engaging flow of play. If you've never played before, we're going to have a beginner's table where we can explore. If you've played it a lot, we'll have some good competition for you. So feel free to bring it in that night for a nice fun game of Wingspan. And then we're only halfway through the madness. On Tuesday, May 14th, we got a trifecta of birding events. So it starts off with a bilingual bird walk at the Menominee Valley at 8 a.m., led by the relatively new branch director there, Yesenia, bilingual Spanish and English speakers. And we will host our annual Big Green Bike Ride. So that's another, let's see how many birds we can see together without using fossil fuels. So we'll be biking to and fro across Milwaukee, see if we can hit that elusive 100 bird mark. Um, you can join us for all or part of the day, and we can supply you with a bike if you need it. And then finally, maybe the highlight of the festival is that we'll be hosting Tiffany Kirsten for the festival keynote speaker. So a few years ago, she broke the record for a big year for the 48 contiguous United States. And she is on a national tour to elevate women birders and birder safety. And so really, really exciting free event. If you're available, I strongly encourage you to sign up. Head on over to the UEC at Riverside Park. I'm super excited to meet Tiffany and hear her stories. So that'll be should be a really exciting evening. And then on Wednesday the 15th, we have another of our weekly bird walks at Washington Park. And you can come not only see the great birds there, but see the progress being made on the construction of the renovated branch of the Urban Ecology Center. It's starting to shape up nicely. And within that building, there will be a great place to observe the birds on the lagoon from a comfy spot in the library. And there's also going to be observation deck on the top. So then, of course, there's the fan favorite that's asked for every year, the field trip to Horicon Marsh with local legends, James Shedd and Brittany Peters. And they are, if that's not enough, which it is, they're also going to be doing this in partnership with the International Crane Foundation. So you can meet folks from there as well. So day-long trip. And then for the evening, we're really excited to introduce Kristen Yertzet, who's an art professor at Wisconsin Lutheran College. She will be taking over from longtime volunteer Maggie Spott to lead a bird painting workshop. And all of the materials will be provided, and she will lead you through an exercise of painting a bird, and you go home with the painting. Super fun event. Then, you still haven't had enough. Another bird walk Thursday, May 13th at Riverside Park. And then a visit to Ware Nature Center to bird with their land manager, Jeff Baglin. So a local spot that a lot of us have been to, but we can have a chance to meet the legend himself, Jeff, as you know, can talk about his ideas and plans and what's going on managing that wonderful green space, part of the county parks. And then the final evening activity for the week is bird trivia night, because that's going to be awesome. So we usually have events. Our friends over at Gathering Place Brewery in River West have been wonderful hosts for the festival just about every year. And this year they're going to be hosting a bird trivia night, so a chance to just kick back and have fun and explore bird knowledge together. And then the festival officially wraps up back where it began, here on Backyard Naturalist. Um, and another group of birds that we have not presented yet is parrots. So this will be Along Came Polly, and then that will be a wrap. And then there's the Backyard Naturalist field trip the next day, and then you can finally rest and recover and reflect on all the fun you had during the festival. And if you'd like to attend any of these events, please visit our website. If you'd like to attend more than one or all of the events, please consider purchasing a frequent flyer pass to the festival, which gets you discounts and priority registration. And then that's it until 2025. So Um, and before we get to the Mayapple, then, just a quick peek at what's going on in the world of space and space exploration. So I actually forgot to check this morning, just a few hours ago. The Chinese Space Agency was set to launch the Chang'e 6 mission, which is to land on the far side of the moon and collect and return moon rocks. So the Chinese Space Agency has both landed a mission on the far side of the moon in the past. It has also collected and returned rocks, but nobody has ever returned rocks from the far side of the moon, and that is what this mission is all about. So hopefully that went uh off without a hitch. And then this is exciting. There was just a write-up about this in New York Times this morning. This weekend marks the peak of the Eta Aquariid meteor shower. So this is the debris left over from Halley's Comet. So if tomorrow night, Saturday night, is the peak, so if the skies are clear, the best time to observe this, unfortunately or fortunately, is before dawn. So if you're able to get, maybe up an hour before sunrise, it'd be a great time to see them. If you're more of the traditional sleep pattern ilk, you can also look for them after sunset. It's just that the closer you get to sunrise, because of the Earth's kind of moving into the path of the meteors after midnight. And it all coincides with a sliver moon. So great dark sky conditions if you can find them. Um, it's a really good time. And you can see you can see meteors year round. But these are the best chances to see them. And yeah, if you get a chance, it'd be a fun activity to do Saturday night. And then another quick, pretty big new development is that the Boeing, or the Boeing that makes planes, is about to launch its first crewed mission to bring astronauts to the International Space Station atop an Atlas V rocket. So it's kind of, for a while, the battle to space between Boeing and SpaceX. SpaceX won for the most part, and SpaceX has been transporting humans back and forth between the ISS, but this launch is set for Monday. You can watch it live online if you're interested, and this will give a second option in the US to get people to the space station and from the space station. So that's happening on Monday. So a lot happening this weekend in the space world. Okay, so now we're going to visit the May apple. The May apple is a plant. It's a vascular plant with xylem and phloem. It's an angiosperm. It's a flowering plant. It's a dicot. So with these designations, we, separate a very large group of plants from things like the ferns and the pines and the grasses, because dicots are characterized by having two seed leaves upon germination, and you see this pattern a lot in many familiar seedlings. Um, and so this kind of puts the mayapple in context with a lot of other plants that we've featured over the years on this show. And then it belongs to the order Ranunculales, which is the buttercup family. And this is one of the oldest group of the dicots. It's a basal group. So evolutionarily, it's one of the oldest groups. One of the first groups to develop this dicot pattern, which a lot of our plants have. So this particular group involves things like poppies and buttercups and hellebores. Um, and then this group would be considered evolutionarily way older than most of the trees we know, most of the shrubs, most of the wildflowers with which we're familiar. So, if anything else, that's one thing to marvel at when you see a colony of May-apples, is you're looking at a really ancient group of plants. And it is in the family. I love family plant name, or plant family names in particular. This is Berberidaceae. Berberidaceae is commonly called the barberry family. You've probably heard before. And so if you're familiar with barberries, there's a lot of different kind. Some are super invasive, but they include everything from trees to shrubs to wildflowers. If you're familiar with blue cohosh, another native that's in this family, vanilla leaf, and then other parts of the world, things like heavenly bamboo, and the California barberry. And then we come to Podophyllum peltatum, or the Mayapple. You may have heard of it as the mandrake. That's another moniker it goes by, the wild mandrake or the American mandrake, and sometimes it's known by the name ground lemon, which will make sense a little bit later. And peltatum refers to the peltate shape of the leaf, and peltate is kind of a circular pattern that kind of resembles a shield. And like a shield, if you're holding it from the back, the stalk actually goes into the back of the leaf rather than kind of coming in from the side. So that's a peltate pattern. And the leaves are palmately lobed, radiating from the center, so kind of like an umbrella shape. And that's one of the easiest ways to recognize the mayapple is that umbrella-shaped leaf with the stalk coming up from the bottom. You don't often see it. It is, you don't often see it as a single plant, although it's possible. Um, and excuse me a second. Um, because it's a colonizing plant. So, you do have to start with a plant. And then that one plant that grows from a seed is eventually going to send out roots and rhizomes. And then underground, it forms a colony coming from the same seed. So this be like a clonal colony because all of the plants are essentially sharing the same genes. And if you're into native landscaping, I know a lot of us are, this is one of the more finicky uh, plants can be in the right conditions. It's fine, but it's kind of a plant that kind of wants to do its own thing. So if you want to start a colony of Mayaples, if you have the right light and soil conditions, you probably wouldn't just start with an individual seed. There are some native plants you can just let seed and go nuts because they're really spreader. But if you were to plant Mayaples, you'd probably want to plant several plugs. Um, because first of all, the Mayaples don't even bloom, and this is kind of ridiculous, until they're maybe even 12 years old. So you planted a mayapple. If I planted a mayapple before my kids were born, I could still be waiting for my first flower or fruit. Um, but I'd probably at least have a small colony. If I decided to sell my house and the new owner decided to keep my mayapple colony, they could be in luck because it's easy for a colony that comes from one plant to last over 100 years. So I think we consider that when we plant a tree, that tree is probably going to outlast us. This is a case of a single wildflower seed that could outlive us easily, and very likely would in some respects. Um, and one of the reasons why it takes a mayapple so long to develop is that they're obligately dependent on mycorrhizal relationships under the soil. So by themselves, even in nutrient-rich soil, if it were sterile, they'd have a really hard time, probably couldn't even grow. So the early first few years while you're waiting things to happen is sending out roots, it's developing that mycorrhizal relationship. Once that gets going and you have a really strong colony, they start to depend less on that mycorrhizal relationship, and it becomes obligate to facultative. But of course, it still benefits. Any soil, as we know, benefits from that rich mycorrhizal relationship, which is why tilling the soil can be really hard on plants. So if you're looking to add mayaples to your native landscaping, like I said, you probably want to start with several saplings, older plants spread out in an area. And then, they will fairly soon spread, and you won't have to wait as long. Not very tall, maybe a foot and a half. So they're great for ground cover, aesthetically pleasing in my opinion, and kind of a subtle beauty to them. And we were talking about this a little bit before that now is when the new stalks are starting to arise from the ground. And this is what you want to look for right about now, um, that they're going to take this form. And uh, it's if you're a morel hunter, from which I'm not, but I know some, that this will be one of the signs that when you see the Mayaples in this form, that's a good sign that it's also time to look for morels. So you'll see them first like this, and then um the stems and the leaves, you'll notice it's one thing you can look for is you'll notice that a lot of the leaves have one stalk and then other leaves have two stalks. The single stalk leaves rarely, if ever, produce flowers. There are certain cases where a single stalk leaf will produce a flower, but it's extremely rare. And then you'll notice that some of the stems branch into two. And those are the stems that are very likely to produce flowers because the flowers come right out of that branching place where the stems diverge. And then um, most of the flowers are white. Again, especially here, you're going to see mostly white flowers, but depending on the variety or where you are, some are a little more yellow, some are a little bit red, but around here, we're going to be looking for that little white flower that comes out of that divergent stalk. And then also you're going to have a little bit of a different, potentially a little bit different type of fruit. If the flower is pollinated, for the most part, you're going to look for a very yellow ripe fruit. And again, depending on where you are in some varieties, you can get something that's a little more green when ripe or a little more red when ripe. But the deep yellow fruit signifies that it's a mature. And that's what's important if you are a wildflower forager, or fruit forager, wild plant forager, because the unripe green fruits of the mayapple are quite poisonous. In fact, all parts of the plant are poisonous. So the leaves, the roots, the rhizomes, it's only the mature fruit that is edible. And a good way to tell if a fruit is edible is that it's got a deep yellow pattern. It often shows some brown spots or bumps like a mature banana or an apple. Like a banana, I know folks that have sometimes allergies want to get the ripest bananas. Same way with the mayapple, you want to get them really ripe. So, wait for them maybe to get some brown spots or some signs of, damage or wear. Um, and then another good thing to look for, because you don't want to eat the unripe um, plants, another good sign to look for is senescence in the leaves. So if you start to see the leaves starting to wither, you can see in this colony here that it's leaves are kind of brown and you can see all those nice yellow fruits in the middle there. They're also a little bit easier to find in the conditions like this. So um, if you do then get a what you think is a ripe fruit, um, some people like to eat it straight from the plant. So the taste is described. I have never eaten one. The taste is described in many different ways, but the pattern I found is that they're lemony, pineapple-y, custardy, and tropical. So one forager in particular described it as smelling and tasting exactly like Starburst candy. One of the reasons why it's called a ground lemon. Um, and the best parts, again, according to those that do forage, are the gelatinous material surrounding the seed in that inner pulp, the kind of slimy part. So uh, people that eat it will kind of suck in that little gelatinous part in the middle. Most people will spit out the seeds. And then they kind of they also they don't eat most people don't eat the seeds and don't eat the outer rind. Um, Partly because that could be where more toxins are stored, partly because there could be like gastrointestinal issues that some people report. So you want to avoid so you suck out the slime, spit out the seeds, and then you take the rind like a watermelon and kind of scrape away that inner fleshy part is supposed to taste very good. Kind of like eating that fish that's toxic. It feels like you're playing a little bit with your health, but again, it's I will never forage for wild mushrooms, but people do. And so it's that kind of like, personal risk-taking ability. But for those that, forage for these, they say they're just absolutely delicious. Um, and then other people, instead of eating them raw, will turn them into jellies and jams, or they'll bake them into muffins or add them to smoothies. And again, there aren't a lot of mayapple eaters out there, partly because of that perceived danger. So I'm tempted to try one. I haven't yet. But of course, please be super careful when doing any wild foraging. Consult professionals or professional resources or things like that. Um, and I'm also going to give the caveat that even though the ripened fruit is edible, it's also considered edible in small, reasonable amounts. So your body does fine with it in small amounts, but in large amounts, even the mature fruits can become toxic. So it's like a buildup. Which is why I tell my kids who love to forage in the wild, yes, it's okay to nibble on a wood violet or a couple wood violets or a dandelion, but just eating one or two, um, and then plus from a conservation perspective, that's good. Just eat a little bit, make sure there's enough. Of course, that rule kind of goes out the window when it comes to service berries and mulberries, but there's plenty of those, so that is okay. Um, and as I mentioned, the rest of the plant is toxic, highly toxic. There's a substance that inhibits cell growth, but also with other kind of toxic or venomous organisms that we study those toxins for a medicinal purpose. It's not toxic as a topical treatment for maladies, so it's used to treat plantar warts on the feet. We got that knowledge from the humans that have lived here on Turtle Island for thousands of years and learned and grown with this plant. And so we learned from them that it's not only a topical treatment, it can be used as a laxative, it can be used as a cathartic, which a laxative softens the stool, and a cathartic accelerates stool production, because Tori's on here and I got to talk about poop at some point. It's used as an emetic to induce vomiting. It's used as an antiparasitic. And in modern day medicine, aspects of the toxins of the mayapple are showing promise in the fight against cancer as well. Mayaples are again, fairly popular in the native landscaping world, again, because they're a nice ground cover. They kind of, fills in spaces without taking them over, requires some patience, and it's kind of a subtle beauty, like ginger. It's not an in-your-face beauty like some flowers, because you usually don't even see the flowers or the fruits unless you lift up the umbrellas to look for them. So it's kind of makes for another reason why, from like a foraging perspective, this is like one of the tougher fruits to go for, because they're harder to find. They're not in like also like morels in some ways. They're a little fickle, so you might find a perfect patch that's produces a ton of fruit next year or one year, but then like for the next 3 years it doesn't produce any fruits. It's a little bit like acorns in that way. So they're fickle not only in their grow, but in also kind of not regular in their fruit. So it's like stalking the wild mayapple is like an art for some. Um, and of course, it's not just the human landscaping. They are ecologically important as a native member of our plant communities. And there's two moths in particular that rely on the mayapple. So the golden borer moth larvae are mayapple specialists. And then, not surprisingly, there is also a mayapple borer, which is also a moth, and also is dependent on the mayapple in the larval form. So the golden borer moth and the mayapple borer moth are closely related, and so likely the two species diverged after they specialized on feeding on mayapples. Um, we don't always think about these, but there's another organism that is dependent on mayapples. It's a kind of a rust or a fungus, like the black knot you see on cherries. There's a rust that only grows on mayapple. It's the mayapple rust, and it infects the undersides of the mayapple leaves with a kind of like an orange honeycomb look to it, and as a native species is fully deserving of our awe and wonder and protection as well. And humans aren't the only animals that like to eat the ripened fruit. So you got raccoons, possums, squirrels, and my favorite is that box turtles can be mayapple specialists in certain areas. They can be the key dispersers of the mayapple fruit. So that one mayapple plant, that kind of first enters an area could get there via box turtle. Um, and then some human foragers that are trying to be a little more in tune with nature. When they're spitting out those seeds, they might take some of them and pop them in the soil a little bit to do their part to disperse disperse the mayapple as well. So not all flowers produce fruit, but the ones that do are cross-pollinated by several insects, and likely the key pollinator group are the native bumblebees, but there's beetles and others that will pollinate as well. And so as we wrap up this episode, I think there are many, many, many candidates to feature among the wildflowers for Backyard Naturalist. And it's probably evident why I chose the May apple, because we just turned the Western calendar page to May, and I've already done the May fly. We still haven't done the Cape May warbler, but the apples of the May apple don't actually come out in May. So I guess you could suggest it's a bit of a misnomer. It's the flowers of the May apple that bloom in May. The apples don't develop and ripen until much later in the summer, particularly here in the northern end of its range. So it's more like an apple tree. It's you could call it a May flower, or you could call it an August apple, which I support because there's already a lot, bunch of organisms named after May. Can't think of any that are named after August yet. Maybe y'all can help me with that one. But so that's the May apple. It's a subtle, fickle plant, important to the natural world, important to humans, easy to identify, easy to look for. Anywhere you got a nice, healthy woodland carpet of flowers. One of my favorites is Seminary Woods. Riverside Park has a really nice mayapple population. So yeah, if you find them, and you like to track phenology, revisit them, watch them develop. You can see all the patterns that we described here. You look for flowers, see if they develop into fruits, and then track them into August and maybe see how long those fruits remain before being picked and eaten by a hungry animal like a human. So thank you for joining me. The Brew City Birding Festival starts next week with Owl's Moving Castle, and I will stop sharing my screen.